Maria Rossi woke before dawn, as she did every morning. The faint light slipped through the thin curtains of her bedroom, painting soft stripes on the worn wooden floor. She rose slowly from her creaky bed, mind already humming with the gentle melody she loved. Today was different, though today the village prepared for a surprise concert by Luca Marino, a singer whose fame stretched far beyond their little town. Despite her nerves, Maria felt a flutter of excitement. She had not sung in public for many years, but her heart still remembered the joy of lifting her voice. She slipped into her slippers and padded across the cool floorboards toward the kitchen. The old kettle sat on the stove, waiting. Maria filled it with water and set it to boil. While she waited, she opened a faded chest against the kitchen wall. Inside lay a stack of old photographs and letters tied with a ribbon. She lifted one. Photo to the window light. A young Maria, singing before a small crowd at the village fair, her dark hair swept back, her eyes bright. She let the memory warm her, then closed the chest and moved to prepare breakfast. In the quiet kitchen, she mixed flour and water to make simple dough for bread. Her hands worked on their own, kneading and folding until the dough felt smooth and alive. She hummed a folk tune from her childhood when the kettle whistled. She poured boiling water over tea leaves and watched the steam swirl. Her small house smelled of baking and fresh tea, a comforting combination she had loved for decades. Outside, she heard the distant murmur of villagers setting up chairs and lights in the town square. A soft breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine through the open window. After breakfast, she washed the dishes and straightened the kitchen. She paused at the window and watched the old stone church tower catch the morning sun. She had lived in this village all her life. She knew every cobblestone in the square, every hidden path behind the bakery where she once worked with her husband. That bakery had closed long ago when he passed away, and Maria had set aside her singing, thinking no one wanted to hear an old woman's voice. Yet inside her chest, her voice stirred, ready to be heard again. She dressed in a plain dress, the kind she wore for market days, and brushed her silvery hair until it gleamed. She fastened a simple necklace, the only piece of jewelry she still owned. It had been her mother's, passed down to her when she was a child. She looked at herself, and the cracked mirror lines around her eyes told stories of laughter and tears, of long years and steady love. She took a deep breath and reminded herself, singing brought her happiness. Whatever happened this morning, she would let her voice be free. She stepped outside and walked down the narrow lane that led to the village square. Bright banners hung between the tall oaks, and strings of lights drooped overhead. Villagers bustled about, greeting one another with smiles and nods. Some carried folding chairs. Others set up a small stage with sturdy wooden planks. The baker's daughter handed out cookies to children, and the blacksmith polished the old iron lampposts. There was a hum of anticipation in the air. Maria paused at the edge of the square, blending into the crowd. She watched as a young man tuned a guitar, its golden wood shining. Men and women chatted in clusters, their voices rising with excitement. A few tourists walked past, cameras swinging. At their sides, Maria felt a gentle tug at her sleeve. She turned to see her granddaughter Sophia, bright-eyed and barefoot, her hair tied in a ribbon. "Nona," Sophia said softly, "will you stay close to me? I want to be with you when he sings." Maria smiled and nodded, placing her hand on Sophia's shoulder. They wove through the gathering crowd until they found a spot near the front. Maria set her small basket beside her feet and held Sophia's hand. Moments later, a hush fell over the square. Luca Marino stepped onto the stage, greeted by cheers that rose like waves. He wore a sharp suit and a confident grin. Maria recognized his voice on the loudspeaker before she saw him, smooth and practiced. He greeted the crowd in his deep, clear voice, then launched into one of his popular songs. The audience clapped and sang along. Maria felt the familiar pull of melody and, without meaning to, joined softly in the chorus. That is when Luca noticed her. He paused mid-song, his eyes scanning the front row. When they landed on Maria, he raised an eyebrow and gestured toward her. On the stage, he leaned into the microphone. "Well, look at this," he said, amusement in his tone. We have our own local singer joining in." He laughed lightly. Maria's heart leaped into her throat. The microphone carried every word. Those around her laughed, shifting to get a better view. Maria felt her cheeks flush and her voice catch. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Sophia squeezed her hand. "Nona," she whispered, worry in her eyes. Maria managed a small nod but took a step back, wanting to disappear. The crowd chuckled as Luca called out, "Let's hear it from you, lady," pointed at Maria, and the spotlight of attention felt like a blazing sun. Maria's knees trembled. She wanted to run, to hide behind the trees, to sink into the earth. Her gown felt heavy on her shoulders. With her heart pounding, she turned away and hurried from the square, her basket swinging at her side. She did not notice tears until they fell freely on her cheeks. Sophia followed, gently wiping them. They slipped down a side alley, away from the gathering crowd, until they reached a small stone wall. There, Sophia caught Maria's arm, concern and love in her eyes. "Nona, are you okay?" she asked, her voice kind. Maria took a trembling breath. She looked into Sophia's eyes and saw no judgment, only care. She placed a hand on Sophia's cheek. I was foolish," she whispered. "I thought my singing was gone. Now everyone knows how out of tune I am." Sophia shook her head. "No, Nona, you have a beautiful voice. He was wrong to tease you." Maria managed a sad smile and wrapped her arms around her granddaughter. As they stood there, the noise of the concert drifted through the walls of the alley. Luca sang another verse, unaware of the hurt he had caused. Maria felt anger rise within her, not against Luca, but against the part of herself that believed she had to stay silent. A small flame of determination sparked in her chest. She would not let this mocking voice take away her love of singing. She held Sophia's hand and looked at her with newfound resolve, promising that she would find her voice again, no matter what. ChatGPT said. Maria Rossi sat at her small wooden table, the afternoon sun painting golden patches on the floor. The walls of her kitchen were warm with the smell of fresh bread, still cooling on the rack. Sophia placed a gentle hand on her grandmother's shoulder. "Nona," she said, voice soft and full of care, "you cannot let one moment take away what you love." Maria looked down at her trembling hands. The memory of the singer's laugh echoed in her mind. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. That evening, after the laughter had faded and only the crickets remained, Maria found herself alone in the kitchen. Sophia had left to help a neighbor carry groceries, and the house was quiet. Maria opened the same old chest where she kept her photographs and letters. She untied the ribbon around the stack of memories and lifted a faded letter, the handwriting, shaky but familiar. It was from her husband Carlo, written many years ago. He had praised her voice, telling her she could light up the world if she only believed in herself. Tears filled her eyes. She pressed the letter to her heart. She rose and walked to the corner where a small upright piano waited under a dusty cloth. The piano keys were slightly yellowed, but Maria's fingers remembered their feel. She lifted the cover and pressed a key. The note rang out, resonant and true. Her heart skipped. She lifted her hand again and played the first few notes of the folk song her mother had taught her. The tune wove through the silent kitchen, soft but sure. Maria closed her eyes and let the melody carry her back to the summers of her youth, when villagers gathered to hear her sing at festivals. Soon, her song grew stronger. She sang the words aloud, voice wavering at first, then growing steadier. With each verse, her confidence returned in small steps. She imagined the crowd at the square, not jeering but smiling and clapping. She imagined Carlos standing beside her, nodding with pride. When she finished, the silence that followed felt gentle and kind, as if the walls themselves cheered her on. The next morning, Maria rose before dawn again. She dressed in her favorite shawl, the one her husband had bought for her at a winter market. In the kitchen, she placed a small stool beside the piano so she could sit as she practiced. She hummed her song, then began to sing the words clearly, carefully. She repeated the chorus over and over until her voice felt sure. Sometimes she stumbled on a note, then smiled and tried again. Outside, a neighbor named Lucano, relation to the famous singer, watched through the window as Maria practiced. He quietly backed away, thoughtful. He knew Maria from when she owned the bakery. He remembered how smooth her voice had been when she sang while she baked early morning loaves. Now he smiled, pleased to hear her melody filling the street. Later that day, Sophia returned. She carried fresh flowers from her friend's garden and placed them in a mason jar on the table. "Heard you singing," Sophia said, her eyes shining. It was beautiful, Nona, strong and clear. Maria blushed but felt a warmth bloom inside her. She gestured to the piano. "Do you want to help me practice?" she asked. Sophia nodded eagerly and climbed onto the stool. Maria taught her granddaughter the chorus, helping her with the words. Their voices joined in harmony, soft and bright. Word traveled fast in a small village. By evening, 2 neighbors stood at Maria's gate, peeking through the open door. They listened to her voice as it floated through the night air. One turned to the other and whispered, "She still has her gift." The other nodded, smiling. They tiptoed away, promising to keep her secret. Each day, Maria practiced a little longer. She wrote the words on sheets of paper and glued them to the kitchen wall so she could remember. Night after night, she sang until her voice felt strong and her heart felt lighter. She even began to smile again when she thought of the famous singer's mocking words, because she knew they were not the truth of her voice. On the weekend, Sophia arranged a small gathering beneath the old oak tree in their backyard. A few friends and neighbors came with chairs. They whispered among themselves as Maria sat at her piano, hands folded in her lap. Maria's heart fluttered like a bird. She looked at Sophia, who gave her a reassuring nod. Maria touched the piano keys, and a hush fell over the circle of faces. She began to sing her folk tune, the same one she had sung at the village fair decades ago. The words flowed smoothly, and her voice carried warmly through the air. The listeners sat in silence, enraptured by her song. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody wash over them. Others wiped tears from their cheeks. When Maria reached the final note, the hush lingered for a heartbeat, then gentle applause rippled through. The little crowd, they rose to their feet, cheering softly. Maria felt tears of joy spill down her cheeks as she nodded gratefully. That night, as Maria sat alone in her kitchen again, she thought of the power the voice had to heal. She picked up the old photograph of herself at the fair and placed it on the piano. She whispered a quiet promise. She would sing again in the square, but not to seek approval from anyone who mocked her. She would sing because her voice belonged to her and to everyone who needed to hear it. Days passed and Maria's practice became more confident. She added a new verse to her song, a verse of hope and resilience that she wrote herself. She practiced it until every note felt like a friend. She stood by the window one morning, singing the new verse to the rising sun. The birds joined in with their morning calls, and Maria laughed softly. She no longer felt the weight of the singer's teasing. Instead, she felt the lightness of purpose. Meanwhile, whispers about Maria's hidden talent wove through the village. The baker's daughter asked to learn the chorus. The blacksmith's wife placed a request for a private performance at the next village festival. Even the mayor sent a polite invitation for Maria to open the summer celebration with her song. Maria read the invitations and felt her heart beat fast. She folded each letter carefully, tucking them into the ribbon-bound chest of memories. Sophia watched her grandmother's transformation with pride. "You are shining again," she told Maria, as they walked to the market one morning. Maria smiled and squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "I feel alive," she said. "It is as if my voice found me again." One afternoon, Luca, the kind neighbor, knocked on Maria's door. He held a small recorder. "I hope you don't mind," he said, smiling, "but I recorded your practice the other day. Your voice, it is a gift." Maria hesitated, then nodded. Luca said, "I would like to share it with others in the village, only to inspire them, of course." Maria agreed, and Luca left with the recorder. That evening, the village square filled once more, this time for a farmer's market rather than a concert. Stalls offered fresh produce, pottery, and handmade crafts. As the sun dipped low, a hush fell when Luca Marino's new hit song played over the speakers, until the music faded and Luca's voice came on. Not his own, but Maria's. Her folk song, rich and clear, filled the square unexpectedly. Villagers looked around in surprise, then smiled and began to applaud. Maria, standing on the edge of the square with Sophia, watched as neighbors pointed at the speakers in delight. Mothers lifted their children to hear better. Old friends clasped hands. The mayor stepped forward and asked Maria to join him on the stage. Heart pounding, she climbed the steps and stood before the small crowd. Luca, this time the famous singer, was there too, his expression unreadable. Maria opened her mouth, and a single note rang out, pure and unafraid. She sang the chorus again, this time in the open air where her voice could travel far. When she finished, the crowd erupted in cheers. That warmed her from head to toe. Luca stepped forward and bowed his head in respect. Maria felt tears of triumph flow freely. That night, as Maria returned home, she held Sophia close. "You believed in me when I could not," she whispered. Sophia smiled and hugged her back. Maria realized that this journey had changed her. She had reclaimed her voice, and in doing so had found herself again. Her song would always carry the story of the old woman who refused to be silenced. And no matter what happened next, she would sing on. Maria woke before sunrise, as she had done for the past week. She moved quietly through the house so as not to wake Sophia. In the cool dawn light, she sat at the piano and lifted the cloth cover. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a moment of stillness, then she pressed a chord. The note rang softly, and she drew in a steadying breath. She began to practice the folk song she had sung under the oak tree, repeating each phrase until it felt second nature. Sometimes she stumbled, and her voice cracked, but she kept going, gently correcting herself and smiling at every small improvement. Each morning, after her practice, she carried a steaming cup of tea to the kitchen table. Sophia joined her there, her eyes shining with pride. They went over the song together, word by word. Sophia watched her grandmother's lips, matching each word, and offered gentle corrections on pronunciation or timing. Maria felt her confidence grow with every repetition. The kitchen walls, once silent witnesses to her sorrow, now seemed to hum with life as her voice filled the room. During the day, Maria practiced again in secret. She tiptoed back to the piano after lunch, closed the kitchen door, and sang with her eyes closed. Neighbors passing by might have heard faint strains of melody through the window. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Bianchi, paused on her way home from the market, recognized the tune, and smiled to herself. She thought, "Maria is singing again?" She did not knock or interrupt. She simply nodded at the window and moved on content. That Maria was finding her voice. In the afternoons, Maria tried something new. She wrote a simple verse of her own, words about hope and courage that had grown in her heart since the singer's mockery. She sketched the words on scraps of paper and taped them around the piano. Then she practiced weaving her new verse into the old folk melody. At first, the new words felt awkward, like a foreign garment. But week by week, they began to fit more comfortably. When she sang the complete song, old verse, her new verse, and the chorus, her voice grew richer, stronger. She felt as though she was stitching together the old and new pieces of her life. Word of Maria's secret rehearsals spread slowly through the village. Luca, the kind neighbor who had recorded her singing at the farmer's market, asked if he might help. One bright morning, he knocked gently on her door, carrying a small stool for Sophia and a notebook. "I thought you might like a place to sit while you practice," he said. "And I wrote down some notes on your new verse, if you want them." Maria thanked him and invited him in. He listened intently as she sang, then offered quiet praise and a few suggestions to strengthen certain lines. Maria felt grateful. His support reminded her that she was not alone. Evening brought another session with Sophia under the oak tree. They sat on a handmade bench, and Maria sang while Sophia turned the pages of the lyric sheets. Fireflies danced around them, and the scent of jasmine drifted on the breeze. At first, only the two of them listened. Then Mrs. Bianchi crept into the shadows to hear. Soon the baker's daughter Tepane and the blacksmith's apprentice Marco joined on tiptoe. They stood in a loose semicircle, enchanted by Maria's voice. When she finished, the small group applauded in hushed wonder. Maria blushed but nodded gratefully. The secret performance gave her a thrill she had not felt since her youth. After that, Maria's routine settled into a comforting rhythm: morning piano practice, midday singing with Sophia, afternoon lessons with Luca, evening performances. Beneath the oak, each day her voice grew stronger, and each day her heart felt lighter. She found herself humming the melody while kneading dough or washing dishes. At the market, she caught herself singing under her breath while selecting fresh tomatoes. People smiled at her as she passed, knowing but politely pretending not to. Their silent encouragement wrapped around her like a warm shawl. One afternoon, event organizer for Luca Marino's upcoming gala slipped a note under Maria's door. It was written in a careful, polite hand. The note said, "We would be honored if you would open the gala with a song of your choosing. Your voice has touched many hearts. Please consider this invitation as a gesture of gratitude and respect." Maria read the words and felt her chest tighten. She clutched the paper to her heart and closed her eyes. At that moment, she understood how far she had come from shame and hiding to the possibility of standing on that stage once more. But this time, by choice and with her head held high. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Maria and Sophia sat together at the kitchen table. Maria placed the invitation between them. The lamp above cast a golden pool of light. Sophia reached out and took Maria's hand. "Nona," she said softly, "this is your chance." Maria felt tears well in her eyes, tears not of sadness but of hope. She looked at the tiny handwriting on the paper, remembered the weeks of practice, the secret gatherings, the quiet growth of her strength. She nodded. She would open the gala. But first, she would finish perfecting her new verse. Make her song a true expression of her journey. That night, Maria sat at the piano alone. The house was still, and only the gentle ticking of the clock accompanied her. She took a deep breath and began to sing old verse followed by new, each note clear and full. When she finished, she let her hands rest on the keys and closed her eyes. A sense of peace settled over her. She had faced her fear, rebuilt her confidence, and found her voice anew. The mocking words of a famous singer no longer had power over her. Her song belonged to herself and to everyone who believed in her. As the moonlight filtered through the window, Maria whispered a promise to herself. "Tomorrow I will share this gift with the whole world." And with that, she turned off the lamp and climbed the stairs to bed, her heart full of anticipation for what the next day would bring. Maria stood before the large mirror in her bedroom, smoothing the soft folds of her pale blue dress. The fabric hugged her shoulders but billowed gently around her legs, giving her a feeling of lightness. She brushed a stray lock of silver hair behind her ear and inhaled deeply. Tonight was the night she had dreamed of and feared in equal measure. She felt a flutter in her chest, like the wings of a butterfly. But she reminded herself of every morning she had risen before dawn to practice, of every evening she had sung beneath the oak tree, of every kind word Sophia and Luca had given her. Tonight, she would step onto that stage and let her voice travel to every corner of the square. Sophia slipped into the room, clutching a small bouquet of daisies she had picked that afternoon. "Nona," she whispered, "you look beautiful." Maria turned and smiled at her granddaughter, seeing in Sophia's bright eyes the reflection of her own courage. "Thank you, Mia Cara," Maria said softly. She tucked the flowers into a tiny glass vase on the dresser. The daisies reminded her of simpler days, of sunlit meadows where she once sang carefree. Now, those memories gave her strength. They walked together to the village square, where lanterns hung in sparkling strings above rows of seats. A soft glow outlined the stage, making it look like a picture from a fairy tale. Workers placed final touches, folding chairs in neat lines, a polished wooden podium at center stage, microphones adjusted to just the right height. Maria felt the hush of anticipation fold around her like a warm blanket. She squeezed Sophia's hand and led her to a seat at the front, where family and friends waited with hushed excitement. Across the square, Luca Marino stood near the edge of the stage, his own musicians tuning instruments behind him. He wore a simple black jacket over a white shirt, no longer the sharp suit from the summer concert. His face softened when he saw Maria approach, and he offered a respectful nod. Maria returned the gesture, her heart steadying. She knew Luca had learned humility through witnessing her journey. Tonight his role was not to outshine her, but to honor her gift. A gentle breeze drifted through the square, carrying the scent of jasmine from nearby gardens. The audience murmured as the mayor stepped forward to welcome everyone. He spoke kindly of community, of resilience, and of the special guest who had opened the gala with a song that had touched many hearts. Maria listened from behind the curtain. As he spoke, her pulse quickening. Her gown brushed her ankles as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She reminded herself of her promise to sing because her voice belonged to herself and to those who needed hope. When the mayor finished, the audience applauded warmly. Then the stage lights dimmed slightly, focusing a soft spotlight on the edge of the curtain. Maria took a final breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped forward. The sound of her heel on the wooden stage echoed in her ears. For a moment, the world paused. Then the spotlight found her, and she saw hundreds of faces turn toward her neighbors, friends, tourists, even Luca's team of musicians. The hush made her feel smaller than ever, yet stronger than she had ever felt. She approached the microphone and placed one hand lightly on the stand. Her other hand rested against her heart. She closed her eyes for a moment, hearing in her mind the hymn of dawn practice, the lessons with Sophia, the secret nights beneath the oak tree. Then she opened her eyes and looked out over the crowd. Her voice began with a single gentle note, pure and clear. The folk melody rose softly, bringing warmth to the evening air. Maria felt a familiar joy unfurl in her chest as she sang the first verse. Slowly, her voice grew bolder. Each word she sang carried the stories of her life, the laughter of her husband in the old bakery, the quiet mornings of solitude, the pain of being mocked, and the rising courage that had reclaimed her song. The audience leaned forward, enraptured. In the wings, Luca stood motionless, his eyes wide with admiration. His earlier mockery felt like a distant shadow in the face of Maria's radiant presence. She sang on, weaving in the new verse she had written about hope and resilience. When she reached that part, her voice quivered with emotion, but she held each note, letting the truth of her words shine. As the final chorus swelled, Maria felt tears blur her vision. She sang on, her heart guiding her. When she reached the final note, she let it linger in the still night before releasing it into the gentle breeze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a wave of applause broke over her, rolling through the square like thunder. Hands flew together in cheers, feet stamped on the cobblestones, voices called her name.
Allie.
Maria closed her eyes, letting the love wash over her. She bowed her head, tears slipping down her cheeks in thankful relief. Backstage, Sophia rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Maria's waist. "Nona, you were amazing," she cried. Maria knelt down, pressing her cheek against Sophia's. "I felt your voice with mine," she whispered. Nearby, Luca approached with a smile softer than any she had seen on him before. He held out his hand, not for a competition, but in genuine respect. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "I am honored I could share the night with you." Maria accepted his hand and rose, feeling a deep forgiveness for the singer who had once mocked her. The mayor invited Maria back on stage to receive a small bouquet from the village. Counsel a sign of gratitude and admiration. She accepted it with a shy grin, then turned to face the crowd one more time. She raised her hands in a gentle wave, feeling stronger and more alive than she had in years. The lanterns above flickered in approval, and the night sky seemed to join in the celebration. Afterward, the gala continued with Luca's performance and joyful dancing beneath the lantern-lit trees. But Maria's opening song remained the heart of the evening, a moment people would remember for years to come. When the night finally wound down, Maria and Sophia walked home hand in hand along the lantern-lined path. The cool air felt sweet, and the hush of the sleeping village wrapped around them. Maria paused by the old stone church, looking up at the tower she had watched every morning. She breathed deeply, closing her eyes. "I found my voice," she said softly to the night. Sophia smiled and nestled closer. Maria knew her journey was not over. There would be other songs to learn, other moments to sing, but the fear that once held her silent had melted away like morning mist. Her voice belonged to her and to everyone who needed to hear its truth. As she walked the last steps to her front door, she felt a gentle peace settle in her heart, ready to move forward, her song forever echoing in the village she loved. Maria woke the next morning to the soft call of birds outside her window. The memory of last night's applause still warmed her heart. She slipped out of bed and stood by the window, looking over the quiet village bathed in dawn's pale light. The cobblestone streets were empty, and the baker's shop across the way held a flicker of lantern in its window. Everything seemed peaceful and new, as if the whole world had exhaled after last night's celebration. She dressed in a simple linen blouse and skirt, the same outfit she wore for practice. She braided her hair loosely, thinking of how much it had grown since her days in the bakery. At the kitchen table, Sophia was already seated, sipping tea and humming a happy tune. When Maria entered, Sophia beamed. "Nona, you look so peaceful," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. Maria smiled, her eyes soft. "I feel peaceful," she said. "Last night was more beautiful than I ever imagined. But today feels like the start of something new." Over breakfast of fresh bread and jam, Maria and Sophia talked about the morning. They planned to stroll through the market and visit the church to light a candle for Carlo. "He would be so proud," Maria said. Maria nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "Is with me every time I sing," she whispered. Sophia reached for the small silver necklace on Maria's neck, the one from her mother. "He helped you find your courage," Sophia said, touching the pendant. Maria felt the warmth of love pass between them. After breakfast, they walked out into the gentle sunshine. The market was alive with color, piles of bright tomatoes, baskets of fragrant herbs, and the rich aroma of cheeses. Maria paused at a stall run by Mrs. Bianchi. The woman held out a small bouquet of fresh daisies. "For the songbird of our village," she said with a wink. Maria accepted them gratefully. She tucked them into the pocket of her skirt and continued on with Sophia, greeting neighbors who offered warm smiles and nods of respect. They stopped by the old stone church. Inside, candles flickered on a low table before a simple altar. Maria knelt, her hands folded. She placed a coin in the donation box and lit a white candle. The flame danced as she whispered a prayer of thanks for the gift of her voice and for the journey that led her back to song. Then she added, "Carlo, this is for you." She pressed her hand to the cold stone wall, imagining his gentle smile. Outside, they strolled to the square, where life had returned to its usual rhythm. The wooden stage still stood, but now held crates of apples for sale. A few early shoppers browsed the stalls. Maria overheard a group of tourists whispering that was her voice they heard last night, and she felt a flutter of pride. She and Sophia paused to admire a painter capturing the morning light on canvas. The artist recognized Maria and dipped his brush to the canvas. "May I paint your portrait someday?" Singing. Maria laughed softly. "Perhaps," she said, "thank you." They returned home by midday, and Maria felt an urge to sing again. She entered her kitchen, set her teacup down, and approached the piano. Sophia brought a chair and sat beside her. Maria lifted the cloth and placed her hands on the keys. She began the song she had sung at the gala, the folk melody with her own verse woven in. Her voice was calm and clear, rising gently in the warm sunlight that streamed through the windows. Sophia closed her eyes and listened, smiling as each note floated through the room. When she finished, Maria looked at Sophia and said, "This song is my story now. It will go wherever I choose." Sophia nodded. They spent the afternoon writing down plans. They made a list: perform at the summer festival, teach a children's choir at the school, record the song so others could hear it on their radios. Maria tapped her pen thoughtfully. "One step at a time," she said. "I will sing when it feels right, and I will stay true to why I sing." Sophia wrote each plan carefully, her heart happy to share her grandmother's dreams. That evening, Maria prepared a simple dinner of vegetables from the garden. She chopped parsley, smelled its bright aroma, and thought how small things could bring such joy. Sophia helped set the table with mismatched plates and the little vase of daisies. As they ate by lamplight, they talked of everyday things. Neighbor's cat, the new road repair, the upcoming harvest festival. Maria felt the contentment of a life balance between small routines and the magic of music. She realized she could have both. After dishes were done, Maria picked up her well-worn notebook, the one where she had taped the verses and written her new words. She turned to a blank page and began to write a letter to Luca Marino. She thanked him for the apology and for respecting her gift. She invited him to any future performances she might choose. As she wrote, she thought of him, not as a mocking stranger, but as someone who had helped ignite her resolve. She smiled as she signed her name at the bottom and folded the letter neatly. For bed, Maria and Sophia stepped outside to the garden behind the house. Fireflies glowed among the tall grass. The air was warm and still. Maria sang a soft lullaby to the night, a melody her mother once sang to her. Sophia leaned against her grandmother, listening as the song drifted on the breeze. When the last note faded, they stayed silent for a moment, letting peace fill them. Sophia squeezed Maria's hand and yawned. "I'll be right here when you need me," she said. Maria kissed her granddaughter's forehead. "And I will always sing for you," she whispered. They walked back inside, the lamplight welcoming them as they climbed the stairs. In bed, Maria stared at the ceiling, thinking of everything that had changed in just a few weeks. She had gone from hiding in shame to standing proud in the center of the village square. She had found strength she did not know she had. She felt gratitude flood her heart for Sophia's love, for her husband's memory, for the kindness of neighbors, and even for the lesson taught by a famous singer's mockery. She closed her eyes and imagined her next song, how it would begin, the words she would sing, the faces that would listen. A smile curved her lips. She drifted into sleep with a single thought in her mind. Tomorrow would bring new melodies, and she would meet them with her voice, free and unafraid. And in that gentle promise, Maria found a joy deeper than any applause, the joy that came from knowing she had reclaimed her song, and it would carry her forward into every new dawn.